Welcome to Fractured Chaos.
They say you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, but no one tells you what happens when you try anyway. My name is Bianca, and I've spent 3 years of my life trying to fix a man who wore his damage like armor. 3 years of collecting the shards of someone else's broken pieces, only to cut myself on every single edge. The night I met him, he had 67 unread messages on his phone. I know because I counted them over his shoulder while he bought me a drink. I should have known then that people who ignore that many messages are running from something or someone. I met Darnell at my best friend's wedding. How's that for irony? Surrounded by promises of forever, I locked eyes with the man who would teach me that some people are only meant to be temporary. He was beautiful in that way that dangerous things often are, sharp edges hidden beneath a disarming smile. When he spoke, it felt like he was telling me secrets, even when he was just commenting on the weather. "It always rains on important days," he said, looking up at the clear blue sky. "Sometimes you just can't see it." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. Our first date was at an art gallery featuring an exhibit on trauma. He knew every artist by name, could recite their histories like they were old friends. I was impressed by his knowledge, captivated by his intensity. I didn't realize he wasn't appreciating the art. He was recognizing himself in it. The centerpiece was a shattered mirror reassembled with visible cracks, reflecting a distorted version of whoever stood before it. Darnell stared at it longer than anything else. Now I understand he wasn't admiring it. He was studying his reflection. What I didn't know that night was that Darnell had been engaged 3 times before. Each relationship ended exactly 2 weeks before the wedding date. He kept the rings in a box under his bed, like trophies or warnings. I found them on our 3rd-month anniversary while looking for a charger. They say love is blind, but that's not quite right. Love is a skilled architect, building elaborate bridges across red flags so you can walk right over them. By month 6, I'd become fluent in his language, translating mood swings into needs, absences into wounds, anger into fear. I started keeping a journal of triggers to avoid, as if his emotional stability was my responsibility. Tuesday, don't mention family. Thursday, avoid talking about the future. Saturday, don't ask where he goes at midnight. I once found a woman's earring in his car. When I asked about it, he said it must have fallen off someone at work. He was a remote software developer who hadn't been to an office in 3 years. I put the earring in my jewelry box anyway, told myself it was vintage, something he'd bought me and forgotten to give. 2 months later, I found its match in his bathroom drawer. I wore both to his birthday dinner. He didn't notice. My friends started creating code words to check if I was okay when we were out together. "Do you want to try the new coffee place tomorrow?" Meant, blink twice if you need help. I always said no. I was too busy trying to earn the love he parceled out like rare gifts, just enough to keep me hungry for more. What I didn't know was that my best friend had already started recording our conversations, saving my increasingly desperate texts in a folder labeled, "When She's Ready." The night of our 1-year anniversary, Darnell didn't come home. No call, no text. I sat at a table set for 2 until 3 a.m., watching candles burn down to nothing. When he finally walked through the door at dawn, he brought me flowers and tears, a story about a co-worker's crisis and a dead phone. I believed him because the alternative was admitting I'd given my heart to someone who could discard my feelings so easily. 3 days later, I found hotel receipts in his jacket pocket. The date matched our anniversary. The guest count said 2. Have you ever noticed how loving someone broken can shrink your world? First, you stop seeing certain friends, the ones who ask too many questions. Then you turn down promotions that might take attention away from their needs. You become a planet whose sole purpose is to orbit their sun, even as it burns you. Darnell had rules that kept expanding. Don't tag him in social media posts. Don't introduce him as your boyfriend to new people until he's had time to assess them. Don't bring up the women who called at odd hours about work projects. Each rule came wrapped in a tragic backstory that made me feel cruel for questioning it. I stopped painting, which had once been my passion. The smell of the oils gave him headaches. I declined my sister's destination wedding because he couldn't get the time off work. Though he somehow managed a weekend trip with college friends I'd never met the following month. I changed my laugh because the real one was too loud. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less needy, less me. What I didn't know then was that Darnell had a file on his computer with all my passwords, screenshots of conversations with my friends where I'd expressed doubts about our relationship, and a document tracking my cycle, moods, and vulnerabilities. I found it while looking for a tax document he'd promised to email me. The file was named Bianca Management. On a cold Tuesday in November, I did something reckless. After finding yet another unexplained charge on our shared credit card, a rideshare to an address I didn't recognize at 2 a.m., I decided to go there myself. The address led to a modern apartment building downtown, the kind with a doorman and a view. I told the doorman I was surprising my boyfriend, gave Darnell's name. The man didn't blink, just called up to apartment 803. "Ms. Vega here to see Mr. Layton," he announced. The woman who answered wasn't surprised to hear my last name. She invited me up like she'd been expecting me for months. Maybe she had been. Her name was Melissa, and as I sat in her immaculate living room, she introduced me to 2 other women. All of us were dating Darnell. All of us thought we were the only one. All of us had a key to this apartment we'd never seen before. The apartment, as it turned out, wasn't even his. It belonged to a 4th woman, currently on a business trip, who'd been financially supporting him for years. The 3 of us sat there comparing notes until sunrise. Similar stories, similar rules, similar isolation. We'd been so focused on his trauma that we'd never recognized the calculated precision of his control. What none of us knew until that night was that Darnell wasn't even his real name. They say there are stages of grief when you lose someone. They don't tell you those stages multiply when you're grieving someone who never existed. I wasn't just mourning a relationship. I was mourning a fiction, a character he'd created specifically to trap me. The 4 of us women did something dangerous next. Instead of walking away, we decided to uncover everything. We became detectives in our own tragedy, pooling resources and information. We found 6 more women across 3 states. We discovered court records of restraining orders, financial fraud, and identity theft. We learned his real name, his real history. The trauma he'd used to excuse his behavior was largely invented. The mysterious absences were carefully scheduled between his different lives. One of the women was a cybersecurity expert. She recovered deleted emails revealing his next targets, women he'd been grooming online while still with all of us. Women who had money, or professional connections, or vulnerabilities he could exploit. My name appeared in these emails too, with detailed notes on how to keep me isolated from potential support systems. What frightened me most wasn't the discovery that I'd been manipulated. It was realizing how close I'd come to becoming him. Suspicious, secretive, seeing threats in kindness and ulterior motives in generosity. I'd started to view the world through his damaged lens. In trying to love someone broken, I'd nearly broken myself beyond recognition. Recovery isn't a straight line. It's a messy, complicated scribble that sometimes doubles back on itself. In the year after Darnell, I lost 20 pounds, then gained 30. I cut off all my hair. I moved twice. I changed my number 4 times. I jumped at shadows and slept with the lights on. I questioned every intuition, doubted every memory. I started attending a support group for survivors of psychological abuse. That's where I met Elena, who flinched at loud noises, and Troy, who couldn't look anyone in the eye. We recognized each other's damage like old friends meeting in a foreign country. In their stories, I heard my own voice. In their healing, I found my roadmap. 6 months into recovery, I received a package with no return address. Inside was my old journal of Darnell's triggers, the one I'd kept to avoid upsetting him. Attached was a note. "You dropped this when you moved out. Thought you might want it for the case." But I hadn't taken that journal when I left. I'd never told anyone about it. The handwriting wasn't Darnell's, but somehow they knew exactly what the journal was for. On the anniversary of the night I met the other women, I received an email from an anonymous address. It contained a single video file. Against my therapist's advice, I opened it. The video showed Darnell, or whatever his real name was, in a coffee shop with a new woman. She was laughing, tucking her hair behind her ear the way people do when they're falling in love. I recognized the body language, the practiced charm, the careful way he isolated her from other patrons. I was watching the beginning of my own story, but happening to someone else. The email had come from Melissa. She'd been tracking him since we'd compared notes in that apartment. "I thought you should know," she wrote. "He's starting again." That night, I made the most dangerous decision of my life. I approached the woman from the coffee shop. Her name was Jade, and she was exactly the type he preferred. Successful, slightly insecure, isolated from family, new to the city. I showed her everything we'd collected, told her everything I knew. I became the warning I'd needed 2 years earlier. What I didn't know was that Darnell had been watching us. He'd installed tracking software on all our devices before we'd discovered each other. He knew about our meetings, our evidence collection. He'd been monitoring everything. 3 days after I spoke to Jade, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken, but everything was moved slightly, just enough to let me know he'd been there, been through my things. On my bathroom mirror, written in my own lipstick, "Some stories shouldn't be shared." I stand before you now, 3 years after the night I met Darnell at my best friend's wedding. I'm not the same person who fell for his practiced lines and curated trauma. The women he manipulated, we stay in touch. We've testified in 2 states against him. He's currently awaiting trial, though his lawyer keeps finding reasons for delays. The charges include fraud, harassment, and blackmail. There would be more if the statute of limitations hadn't run out. I still have nightmares about those 3 years. I still sometimes check under my bed, behind my shower curtain. I still maintain a go bag with cash and copies of important documents, just in case. Healing isn't about erasing the scars. It's about acknowledging them without letting them dictate your future. To love a broken person is to risk becoming broken yourself. It's to mistake control for care, isolation for intimacy, jealousy for passion. It's to pour yourself into someone else's cracks until there's nothing left of you to reclaim. Some people aren't projects to be fixed or puzzles to be solved. Some damage isn't beautiful or romantic, it's just dangerous. Last month, I received a text from an unknown number. "I miss the way you used to look at me." I didn't respond, but I did something I wouldn't have been capable of 3 years ago. I blocked the number without needing to know if it was really him. I didn't need the closure or the confirmation. I didn't need to hear his voice or his excuses. The truth about loving broken people is this: it's not your love they're after. It's your wholeness. They don't want to be healed. They want company in their damage. They collect broken hearts like evidence that the world is as cruel as they believe it to be. Yesterday, I painted for the first time in 4 years. It wasn't very good, and it didn't need to be. It was mine, my colors, my canvas, my voice. I'm relearning how to take up space, how to make noise, how to exist without apology. The final thing I discovered about Darnell, the thing I learned just last week, was perhaps the most chilling of all. In his apartment, police found journals dating back 15 years, detailing every relationship, every manipulation, every woman. My journal was there, filled with his observations, his strategies, his assessment of my weaknesses. The first entry about me was dated 6 months before that wedding where we supposedly met by chance. Nothing about our meeting was accidental. He'd been watching me long before I ever saw him. But here's what he never understood, what broken men like him can never comprehend. Being targeted doesn't make you a victim forever. Sometimes it makes you a witness. Sometimes it makes you the voice that prevents someone else's silence. Sometimes it makes you exactly the woman you were always meant to become, one who recognizes the value of her own unbroken spirit and will never again mistake damage for depth.